Friday, October 10th, 2014 was just another typical day, a day that we took for granted, just like any other day. I got my boys up to go to school. My husband was working out of town. I was teaching. Scooter was in his 12th grade year of school. Jerry Wayne was in 7th grade. Little did I know when we left for school that day, I had a long day at school, after school activities. Jerry went to a church event and Scooter went to work and later went to a friend's house. Little did I know that I would be falling asleep before his curfew, and the next day would change our lives. October the 11th, 2014, I was awoken by the sounds of dogs barking. I immediately jumped to my feet, went to the window and peeked out, and I just saw like a sea of blue lights. I immediately ran to the door, opening and screaming, "What's wrong?" The police officer said, "Are you Miss Birmingham?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do you own a Jeep Wrangler?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And at that moment, I noticed the Jeep was not in my driveway. He immediately told me, "Ma'am, you need to get ready and go to Olive Branch Hospital. Your son has been transported there and may be lifted from there to the med." I began to cry out and say, "Sir, what's wrong with my son? Is he alive?" And he said, "Ma'am, I can't tell you any more information. But all I can tell you is you need to get there as soon as possible." I go into the home, I get dressed, and I leave. Frightened to death, didn't know what to do except pray all the way and started calling family. When I walked in Olive Branch Hospital, they would not let me see Scooter, and I began to get nervous and afraid. But then Jeremiah 29:11 came to thought, where the Lord said that He already had plans made out. I went on in and got to see Scooter, and from that moment, I just broke down and began praying and didn't know what else to do but just pray over and over, seeing my son with the tubes running from one end to the other and blood and no response. The doctor came in to talk to me and said that he wanted to transfer Scooter to the med, although they were not sure that he would be able to survive the trip. I just couldn't do anything but think in the book of Luke how it talks about there's nothing that's impossible with God. And that's all I had to believe in and all I had to claim to at that time. So I just began to pray, and when we were transferred, it was just really, really hard to think that was the longest ride of my life from one hospital to the next, wondering if my 18-year-old son was going to live. Once we arrived at the med, again, they would not let us see Scooter for a couple of hours because they were trying to get him stable. The doctor called us in for a meeting. By that time, my husband had driven a 3-hour trip, or was transported a 3-hour trip home so he could be with us. The doctor sat us down and told us all the extent of the damage. The doctor said, "We are only giving your son 24 hours to live." He has severe brain damage, multiple brain damages. He has what we call a noxic brain injury. That means that his brain went without oxygen for a long period of time. He also has 2 hematomas on one side of the brain, 1 hematoma on the other. He also suffers for diffuse axonal injury, which is the worst kind of brain injury there is, where the 2 hemispheres separate. There are cuts and lacerations all over his brain, and the entire brain is damaged. He also has brain swelling and brain bleeds. He has a right eye socket that is broken, right ribs, lung is damaged, and his right femur has broken and ripped his leg wide open. His right ankle was broken. At this time, ma'am, we don't see any activity on your brain, and therefore we're giving him 24 hours to live. As they were explaining all the damage to the brain, we couldn't figure out exactly what all had happened. It was just maybe a day or two later that we had gotten a police report, and we had talked to the paramedics, and we realized that during the storm that night, Scooter had lost control. He flipped his Jeep, ran from one side of the road to the other. Something was distracting him, and they think that he hydroplaned. His Jeep flipped, hit a tree, flipped again. Sometime in the process, the top part of the Jeep was cut off. He was ejected from the vehicle and landed on the road. We are not sure that he was wearing a seatbelt. I really don't believe he was. And there was a chance that he could have possibly been trying to respond to a text. But what I do know is that after he landed in the road, he laid there on his own in the rain, damaged for over 2 hours. It was storming, so the helicopter could not lift him. They came in to tell us the next day that they were going to have to pull the life support because there was still no brain activity, and I refused. I said, I've already prayed, and although I have a room full of physicians in this room, none of y'all are as great as the one that I serve. God has given me peace, no matter how crazy y'all think I am, that my son will walk and talk again. I don't know when, I don't know the day or the time. I refuse to allow you to pull him off this life support. 18 days later, Scooter opened his eyes for the first time. The very next day, he was taken completely off the ventilator. You know, all I could think about was when we tried to explain to my youngest son, Jerry Wayne, that was in the 7th grade, son, I just have to tell you, although we believe in God, God's plan may not be ours. And although we want him to stay and we want him to walk and talk, and I know that deep down inside I feel that he's going to do that, but I just have to prepare you that God's plan might be different. He looked at me and said, Mama, I prayed all the way up here to this hospital, and I know my brother's going to be okay. He said, let's just remember that he's going to be okay. From that day on, I never doubted anything because I told God that I wanted a childlike faith that was unwavering. And no matter what anybody tells me, doctors, no statistic can change my mind from my faith of what I believe that God can do. Although Scooter was on the ventilator for so long, and they said he would never be more than a vegetable once he got off, he remained in the Med hospital for 4 months. During our stay at the Med in Memphis for 4 months, we were blessed by God in so many ways that each day Scooter was overcoming something they said he would never do, but it still wasn't where he needed to be. While we were there, Scooter endured 21 procedures. Some of them were really, really significant procedures. One was a skin flap. He had a pressure ulcer on his backside that was 8 to 10 inch oval by 2.5 inches deep. They had to do a massive operation on his back and removed one whole section of the gluteus maximus, which is the largest muscle, the butt muscle. They removed one whole section, and it took over 100 staples across his back. He had to lay face down for 7 weeks. Once he turned over, he still was not awake and still considered in the coma. During that time, we were blessed. So many people were coming and visiting and saying, you know, we're going to be there for you this whole journey. No matter what, we'll be there. Scooter's friends came. My friends and family came. We were blessed with food and monetary donations and just so many blessings. I can't even count them. But yet we also had other things going on. During that time, we were robbed from. During that time, we lost several family members to death. I lost my pastor to death and his wife. And it was just a month before Scooter's accident that I lost my biological dad. And during this time, people was constantly saying, Angie, how can you keep going on? And I just have to remind them, it's the grace of God. After spending October and Thanksgiving and Christmas in the Med, we transferred to Atlanta, Georgia to the Shepherd Center, which is a brain rehab hospital. We were there from February until April. We came home finally in April, which was after 6 months. At that time, Scooter was just emerged from the vegetative state to minimally conscious. He was still titled in a coma, minimally conscious. While we were there, Scooter would have therapy 6 days a week, 3 to 5 hours a day, intense therapy and training. We were trained on how to take care of him, things to do, things not to do. At that time, I did not still want to put him in a nursing home. I wanted to continue to take care of him at home as long as God continued to provide. Although I had been teaching and been at work for 13 plus years with my job, I knew that God was going to make a way for me to take care of this child that belongs to him, that he's let me borrow. And so I carried him home. We were home for a year taking care of Scooter. I would carry him to therapy. I would do therapy at home myself. Did lots at home with him because no one around here knew what to do, how to do it, and of course the insurance didn't want to pay. With lots and lots of prayers, I was finally able to get him in some outpatient therapy. It was in November of 2015 when Scooter finally emerged from a coma, and saying that he was technically in a coma for a year. He emerged in November, and we went back to the Shepherd Center in January. After staying there for 2 months, they had done all they could do, and they said it's time for y'all to go back home again, and we'll send you home with more trainings. So we went back home in April again of 2016, and we've been home ever since then. Since we've been home, we've continued therapy with Scooter. We have now got him into gym 2 days a week. He goes to vision therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. Scooter needs all of these things to help him. God is continuing to still bless us. The therapies, a lot of the time, insurance will not pay. Tons of supplies that require that we have to continue to buy. A lot of medical expenses, but God is still continuing to take care of us. And we are so grateful for God's blessings, for everything. We feel so unworthy. And at times I just even feel ungrateful. But God yet still continues to bless us. And I can't help but to think, during this journey, I've really learned how to walk by that faith and not by sight. If I went by sight, I would say that I would have to have given up a long time ago. We still have a ways to go in this journey, but with God, all things are possible. And I'd like to tell you that my name is Angela Birmingham, and on behalf of Scooter Birmingham, thumbs up.
Feeling tired? We do a shorter walk. Hey, you feel sick or you tired?
Do thumbs up.
Thumbs up, Scooter. Oh, there! Yeah! That was it.
God's grace is enough.